How I stopped drinking and rediscovered myself. On November 7, 2017, I flew from New York City, where I live, to Martha's Vineyard to take care of my mother for a week while she recovered from knee surgery. The night before I arrived to find my mom in bed with her knee propped up, slightly loopy from oxycodone and gushing with gratitude that I'd come. It was strange to see that. I made lunch, noting as I rummaged through her refrigerator that there wasn't any wine or beer left over from a recent dinner party as there sometimes was. After we ate, there is nothing like a mindless exercise to prompt a little mindfulness. And I was disconcerted for women, especially older women, high-risk drinking and alcohol use disorder, which is the DSM's term for alcoholism, is on the rise, according to nationwide health surveys published in JAMA Psychiatry in 2017. Married or it's been a rough year. Starting with Trump, ever since my first drink at age 11, a bourbon and orange juice at my best friend's house, after which we wrote swear words in red marker on the walls of her attic. Alcohol had gone down with a splash of shame. There was the shame of, after finishing in the yard, I went back inside and worked until it was time to make dinner. We ate, the rest of the week passed without my ever going to the liquor store. The night after After a moment, my daughter nodded. Thanks. I had half a glass of wine on Thanksgiving after cooking a meal for 22 and at my mother's 80th birthday party in December, when I had nothing in my glass during a toast, and someone filled it with a very good Sancerre ID picked out back when I was still drinking. But after going with that, I had one final drink on New Year's Eve on the last night of a visit to my in-laws. We were out to dinner. I made it through a historically boozy regular get-together with girlfriends. Hosting a party. Now when I go out, I am quieter than I used to be, but, surprisingly, I am less socially anxious as a non-drinker. Since there are also plenty of times when I am both bored and feel boring. My attempts at conversation never go anywhere, or I feel leaf-footed or overly serious when trying to join in on some group discussion. It's like being sometimes it's depressing to think that I may never again enjoy a fabulous Pinot Noir with a great steak, a very dirty martini with a girlfriend at a dark bar, or an Aperol spritzer on a sunny terrace in Italy with my husband, but the delight of those experiences has always been less about the drink than the pleasure of the company and the ritual. And guess what? Get Sean Dalen directly in your inbox.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.